This is a V4 Honda, and today we're going to put it up against its modern day equivalent and see which one comes out with the most points. And I think you'll be surprised with the outcome. The first thing we're going to look at dramatically affects the feel of the bike. But before we get into that, let's look at the thing that really separates this bike from its modern day equivalents. Now this bike is a V4, which isn't common, but what does that actually mean? Well, apart from having a cool name, this engine configuration tends to generate more power The downside is V4s are more complicated, which leads to a higher price tag. Just like my girlfriend. When comparing to say a CBR 600 or an R6, well, they both have inline 4s, so I think it's safe to say the V4 wins this point. Although having said that, this is only a 400, which means all 600s should get all over it. But although it's just a 400, it is a very quick 400, and will keep up with any 600 until maybe about 70-ish, in which they'll start to pull away. Compared to other 400s, the 0 to 60 times are very similar, but the top speed is where you see some differences. This has a top speed of 130, whereas a Ninja 400, for example, has a measly top speed of just 116. Not a big difference, but a difference nonetheless. The next thing on this list is really irritating. But before we get into that, let's look at my favourite thing about bikes. This particular bike has a GP exhaust system, but even without that, in my opinion, it sounds so much better than an inline 4. Now don't get me wrong, I love the iconic sound of a 600 at 17,000 RPM, but the V4 is just different. And as a bonus, this bike has a nice whine to it from its straight cut gears. But of course, this is a very subjective topic, so I'll just let you listen to it. The next thing we're going to look at is the very first thing that you judge a bike on. But before that, let's look at something that can really make a bike a pain in the... Now most bikes up until around the 2000-ish mark had carburetors, and this bike is no exception. Now I do find these particular carbs to be more tricky than regular carbs. Perhaps they're more complex, or perhaps I'm just useless.
Hey guys, Chris Fix here.
But generally, carbs are great. They're often simple, although not always. They're also relatively simple to modify and repair, and they sound incredible. Although they're generally less reliable, they're more sensitive to changes in temperature, and they can be difficult to start from cold. Personally, I do think fuel injection is better. You just can't beat the reliability and peace of mind. And although there is something very special about a carved bike, I think the modern day equivalent gets this point. Okay, the next thing on this list is surprising for a bike of this age. But before we look at that, let's compare the most important part of any bike. This is a very good looking bike, very track bike-esque. And even in its original form, it's stunning, probably more so than when it's modified. Modern day styling is heading away from the traditional sports bike type look and is heading more towards a sports tourer and just a generally more boring look. But of course, not all new bikes are like that. I think the new R6 and the new R7 look great. And although this is another very subjective area, I just don't think you can beat the classic styling that this V4 Honda has. Now, although 12-year-olds would disagree, power and looks aren't everything. In order to be a good bike, it also has to... And well, this bike is known for that. In fact, it's so good, these bikes are often used for track days and racing. It's also supposedly very forgiving and lets you get away with murder. So if you're rubbish like me, what could possibly go wrong?
What a sight! Oh, it's down! Oh,
Compared to modern bikes, it's probably not as comfortable and probably doesn't handle as well either, considering it's 35 years old. Maybe the differences are minor, and even if they are, I'm definitely not skilled enough to be limited by them. So, is it worth it? Well, they're fairly expensive, ranging anywhere from £3,000 to £6,000, or 3.8 to 6.7 for all of you bald eagles out there. So they're not cheap, and you'll probably pay similar for a modern day equivalent. With that in mind, I think it depends on who you are and what you want the bike for. If you're an old soul looking for a weekend toy, then absolutely. But if you're looking for a commuter, well, probably not.